Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, and as per usual, I have our final guest for this series of unusual dialogues, Euan McLellan, who's here with me today. Hello, Euan.
Hey, Wojciech, how you doing?
Great, wonderful to have you here. Funnily enough, Euan is a brother of Trenton, and we're recording in the same room in the very same setting. So I hope that's going to be an interesting for you guys as well. I don't know if you might notice, but funnily enough, I feel both Euan and Trenton have quite a radio voice. So that's fun. It's welcome to everyone liking that kind of ASMR experience. Before we go into the topics that I wanted to chat with Euan about, I'll give him space to briefly introduce himself and maybe just share a few things. Who are you?
Cool. Yeah, well, so I'm Euan McLellan. Pretty much my identity at the moment is a gymnast. I've been doing it for most of my life. I've finished school about 4 years ago and I thought about going to uni, but I decided to kind of keep away from it just while I'm training and things. I've worked at a bar for a bit, kind of working at a business centre now. I've kind of just been in it for me, really. Sticking with gymnastics and a little bit of work. That's about it. Yeah.
Wonderful, and that's exactly why you're here. I remember obviously I knew of you before, but then at Trenton's birthday party, I'm pretty sure. We chatted, and I thought it might be useful for people and interesting to hear from a professional athlete. And as you said, you finished school and went straight into sports. When did you start gymnastics?
So I started gymnastics when I was about 4-ish, and then I kind of got into the proper stuff when I was about 7.
Okay. Was it from the beginning in a club as an idea, like this is for sports gymnastics?
So it was, the first club I went to was kind of like a tumble tots type thing. It was just more for a bit of fun and wasn't really actual gymnastics. And then the coach there was recommending me to go to an actual club, and she recommended West Lothian Gymnastics Club. And I've been there ever since I was 7, so about 14 years now.
Yeah, so I mean that's a career in itself, and that's just getting started. You're very young still. So a little bit of background here. What was there a reason they commended you towards that club? Were you outstanding in any way, or is it only that at that age, if a child is interested, then let's get him in? Because it's 7 years old. That's fairly young still. Yeah. So gymnastics, you normally do have to start really young. It's very rare that you have someone start as a teenager and be get into kind of the quality you need to be professional, I would say. I did start, and I think I was quite young compared to other guys that were there, and I may have been a little better. I'm not really sure. I don't really remember it that well, but I think I was just that kind of bit more interested, a bit more motivated, and tried a lot of things. So that's when she recommended me to the club, and I started there, and it's been good. No, wonderful. And just in terms of before I go into the nitty-gritty parts about being a professional athlete, and I'll also would like to explore how did your training routine change from being 7 and now to being 21. It's a huge chunk of time, but maybe just for the context, and we might explore that deeper later on. What are the successes, would you say, so far for you in that area? Do you consider yourself, on the right track? Yeah, I would say so. For me, kind of some goals of mine has been to get to the Commonwealth Games. I've had that since I was pretty young, I would say. So from when I was younger, it was obviously a little more fun, kind of just training for a bit and not really taking it as serious, but still wanting to do well. And eventually when I kind of started getting into it more and going to more competitions and things, we upped the hours. Obviously I got older and things got a bit more serious. And when I got later into school, I started to have free periods and all that stuff, so we changed our training schedule so we'd have more hours during the day, so it meant we could spend more time on certain things and not need to rush stuff, because for gymnastics you do spend quite a lot of hours in training. It's like a 4-hour session for us is a shorter session,
So on Tuesday, we train from 1 to 9, and that gives us time to kind of work through stuff. And yeah, so as I got older and later in school, I had that 1 to 9 session on Tuesday, and that has really helped me kind of, I guess, progress to look at things more seriously and more of a professional career.
And what does it take to go to the Commonwealth, to be chosen for Commonwealth? Just for context, because guys, as you know, we are in Scotland right now, and Euan is practicing gymnastics for the Scottish team, right?
Yeah.
And you've explained to me on the at the party that there are sort of two levels, or maybe more than that, the national level and then the Commonwealth level, right?
Yeah.
So can you just give us some context here?
So right now in Scotland, in the squad, you kind of so you have to be at a certain level, and you have to go through trials, and you go through competitions, and then you can be selected for the team. But that, I think, can be up to like 12 to like 15 people. They are trying to make a kind of focus group. So that means for competitions like the Commonwealth Games, like bigger competitions, there'll be like a group of 5 or 6 boys who they think are kind of the top of the team. And that's the ones that we get selected to go to competition. So you can be very good, be in the squad, but not good enough to be part of like the group that would go away to the Commonwealth Games. So it is trying to get to that level. So right now, being in the squad, I've been in it for most of my life. But getting to the level of being in the team for something like Commonwealth Games, that's a bit different. That's a bit more. And that was cool.
Because, do I understand correctly that basically in the Scottish team, all of them are Scottish, whereas for Commonwealth, you're joining a team consisting of the UK overall. So it's just a bit more competitive to get into that 5-6.
So for Commonwealth Games, it is just Scotland.
It is still Scotland,
yeah.
so is the team just smaller?
So for a team, it's only 5 or 6. That's just it for in the squad. So like the squad isn't who you take to all competitions kind of thing. Okay. The squad is consistent of boys who are good and could be really good, especially younger ones. They might not be as good to be in the team, but they might be later. And it's kind of like you have that, I guess, pool where they can work and kind of create a greater team, and then some of them get better gymnasts might improve the lesser gymnasts, and especially when they get older, they might get to the higher level than the people are already in the team kind of thing.
Of course. And as a team, you're competing within the squad to be chosen for the competitions, but then once the competition sort of comes up, as a team you're supporting those few that were chosen.
Oh yeah. Like we're always supporting each other, and we always want each other to do the best, like that everyone can. It seems from outside it would be a difficult dynamic, but it's always been quite natural in our squad that you've never wanted anyone to not do well. You've always wanted everyone to do well and their best, and then if you manage to do your best and it is better than theirs, then that's just how it goes, and you get to go. And when you are frustrated, so like last Commonwealth Games, I made the reserve. I was close to make the team, but I just didn't make it, and I didn't feel any sort of way towards any of the gymnasts. I was disappointed that I didn't make it, but I was just disappointed in not making it.
And I think you've mentioned that during our chat as well. Not making it can be really tiny change. Can you just give us a context? How is the, for anyone watching? Because guys, just as a fun fact, I watched Euan's performance on one of the competitions with Trenton, and he was trying to explain to me whether or not it's going well.
Yeah.
And then I asked you about that, like how that point system works.
So in gymnastics, you have what's called difficulty in execution. So depending on how hard your routine is, it has like higher points to start with. So if you have a lot of difficult skills, you might have something like a 15.5 start value, right? But then when you do the routine, they deduct points depending on how well you do it. So say if you bend your knees, then you get a deduction for that. If you bend them more, you get more of a deduction, taking steps and landings, bending your arms, catching things close, just lots of different things that you learn about. But they are really fine margins. So you can so each skill is graded as like difficulty. So from 0.1 up to, I think now it's up to 0.9. And you add up like there's like 10 skills you can do in a routine, and then once you have it all together, you can repeat it, try and do it well, and then they will take off whatever they think they need to take off. So like in a scale, if you bend your knees by like a little bit, it would be 0.1. If you bend them by a lot, it would be like 0.3 deduction. And sometimes that difference can be between making the team or not, kind of thing. So for me, the last Commonwealth Games, what put me forward was my pommel routine. I was hitting scores which, to qualify, I think you had to hit above like a 12.8 or 12.6, which at the time I didn't think was very high, but I was glad that it was kind of a bit lower. So I hit those qualifying scores. I hit like a 12.9 twice, and but it wasn't really good enough for me, and there was other pieces which I didn't hit which I could have, and the difference between me hitting it and not hitting it was literally just a step, or bending my knees a little bit, or bending my arms, or something happened where my shape goes, and that's just literally like a couple times of that, and that's it, and that's made the team, kind of thing. It's difficult because...
No, fair enough, and I do wonder, because at this point you've definitely had 10,000 hours, as they say, of practice, considering even just those Tuesday sessions.
Yeah.
Can you tell in your performance, as well as in others, if someone did good or not?
Yeah.
Can you tell it straight away?
Pretty much, yeah. Like I won't know the exact kind of score you'd get from the judges, and because judging is technically subjective, because they choose whether or not if it's like something's worse or better, kind of thing. There is like a standardization to it, but it's them saying what they think it is. I can generally tell what ballpark the score should be in. Like if it's really clean, I'll be like, okay, it's that score. And if it's like difficult and really clean, it's like it should be quite high, kind of thing. But I can also judge it at the same time. So when they're going through routine, I can judge it in my head, and I'll get like a rough score that judges will get. But it is like an acquired kind of skill, because it's weird for me when I'm watching it. It just feels so natural to know if something's good or not, or to know what's happening. And then someone else next to me, say like Trenton, he has also been learning over the years, but it's still, we'll be watching something and they'll be so like, I know my brothers will be so confused when I'm saying this is this or this is that or that's happening.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it's such a specific scoring system. You know, it's nothing like a goal or a net. It's literally a matter of. I do wonder. Do you know if the judges are using any technology to check the angle of bent knees, for example?
So we don't have that at the moment. It is probably something that would make things a lot more fair and a lot more, well, less likely to be biased, because that is also a problem, because there is that subjectiveness, even if it is like subconscious bias, like they don't know that they're doing it. A lot of times judges from the country of the person who's competing might be easier on them.
Of course.
Or sometimes it's actually went the other way, where they've been harsher because they're worried what people thinking they're being easy on them. So,
or they blinked.
Yeah, or they blinked and they missed something. That happens all the time. But that's why you normally have a lot of judges. So they have like a big panel, and they have like a variety from different countries, and they pick them a certain way, and it does make it more fair, but there still is that kind of subjectiveness. So when it is a really close competition to like down to like the 0.1 or 2, it can be like, well, technically you don't know who was like perfectly in that position or in the other position, kind of thing.
And does it happen often or at all that people challenge the decision?
Yes, so you can challenge. So you can't challenge execution. So you can't challenge what they take off, but there's judges who add up the difficulty. So when you do skills, they'll add up how much the routine is worth, and if they think you didn't, so if you did the skill really badly, it won't get counted and they won't add up to your difficulty. So they're called the D judges. If they decide that a skill wasn't good enough, or it just didn't look like the skill or whatever, then they add it up, and it might not be what the gymnast thought it would be. So you can put in an inquiry, which I don't know how much it costs at certain competitions, but bigger competitions it might cost like £50 to put in an inquiry, and then if you're right and they look back in it because they can see videos and stuff at bigger competitions, and they're like, right, yeah, we'll give it to you, then you get your money back. But then if you're wrong and they say no, it definitely wouldn't have counted, then they keep the money. It's kind of funny. It's a weird system.
So then I assume you would be able to potentially get a better score in the end, but that wouldn't, I don't know, maybe it would it affect the final, like, gold medal not going to the person who got it?
So there was
originally?
actually a really kind of crazy one that happened in that exact example. So usually the top kind of three are China, Japan, and then Russia at like Olympics and stuff like that. There was, I can't remember what happened to Russia. I don't know if they didn't do well, but I think it was the 2012 Olympics. It was finishing with China, Great Britain in second, and then Ukraine in third, and then I think Japan was fourth. And this is all because the last gymnast from Japan who went up in pommel, they did their dismount, but they messed up and it was really weird. And then the judges didn't count it and they took like a huge amount off because obviously they didn't count the skill and you don't get all this stuff added on as well. So then they were down in fourth. Then they put the inquiry in and the coach was like saying, even though it looked really weird, it did count. They did what the requirements were. So then they gave him it and then they went up to second place. So this is the Olympics for the team medal. They got second place and then Ukraine got pushed out of medals and we got third.
And was that inquiry had to be sort of review before the ceremony?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, but fair enough.
Not
yeah.
after, yeah. It would never happen after. It always happens in the actual competition. So inquiries will only happen pretty much straight after. Once you see the score, you go up to the judges and you give them, or you get an inquiry sheet and give it to them straight away. It doesn't happen after because, that would be pretty difficult taking away medals and giving them to other people after a ceremony.
Awkward.
Yeah, it's not,
Very awkward. All right, before we dive into the professional athlete mode, one last space here that I wanted to give you a sort of audible space for is any, being right now 14 years into it, and as we've talked on the at the party, you will be in it for a little while longer. What is maybe some lesson or some theme that you found or something that this practice of yours brought into your life? Obviously, apart from passion and a lot of self-discipline, I know something that really spurs into mind the moment I ask this.
Yeah, no, I think, for me, big part is self-discipline. That's something that has stuck, especially after COVID for me. But it's, I don't know, I think learning kind of from a psychological aspect about how to enjoy doing something that I love, but I'm trying to do really well. That's been really difficult at some points in my career. And I think that's really important. That's what a lot of athletes struggle with, is actually enjoying the sport, because it becomes so serious. They're trying to do so well, and learn kind of techniques, and maybe talking to psychologists or talking to anyone really, to understand how to enjoy the sport like you used to when you're young, because that's what everyone always does. They enjoyed the sport when they're younger. They got into it, it got really serious, and then it becomes less enjoyable.
Much pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So learning that has been difficult for me, and I still am learning it. Sometimes I'll go through phases, but that is a big part for me, is having it as a career but also still enjoying it, kind of thing.
And what, if I may ask, what you've mentioned a few, what techniques or what have you tried to light that fire again?
So for me, it's quite technical based. So there'll be stuff where I'll change my training. I'll do things where I'll take breaks from certain stuff, and I won't just solely focus on trying to get these routines done, because it is really repetitive in gymnastics. You are doing the same routines over and over and over and over again. And there is a thing where you want to add in new skills, but they have to be pretty much perfect to get added in. And it's really difficult to add in new skills which aren't, I guess, ready for. So I think taking some pressure off doing the routines, because I was especially I think last year or even the start of this year, I was really focused on needing to do the numbers, needing to do all the same thing over and over and over again and get it perfect. And then I got really stuck, and there was nothing fresh. So it kind of sucked for me. I did not feel great about my training at all, and I felt like I was going nowhere. So then I think I took some pressure off it, and didn't allow, trying not to allow coaches or outside perspectives to put pressure on me. and to feel like I need to do these things, but also to just trying stuff and having fun and not focusing on needing to get the numbers done, because sometimes getting those numbers done and focusing on it so hard means you don't actually improve.
I see. No, and I can imagine that being a sort of a plateau moment every now and then.
Oh yeah.
As you, it's not linear at all.
No.
I guess it might be linear when you're 7 up until you're 9, but then very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's get to that. So obviously, the majority of our listeners are actually our age or slightly older,
Right.
and the majority of them, I think, are in the show for the benefits of just, you know, applying some practical skills or some philosophies that allow people to just get better or you know, achieve some successes. And I think a big part about being a professional athlete touches on those points. Like you said, the mental health and the physical health, they go hand in hand. And I remember asking you about the diet and being quite surprised that you mentioned you don't really follow such a, you know, as a strict as I would expect one to do. So maybe could you give us a little bit of context of, you know, maybe how did your gymnastics routines in life change over the course of your career so far, maybe the major changes, and also what do you do on a regular basis apart from training, but also give us some, you know, training ideas to keep up with it, because basically what I see people do on professional level in any sort of sports is you just want to be on the edge all the time. So what do you do to keep yourself there?
Well, I guess for me, also, I was talking about having fun with training. That is kind of a big part for me. It keeps me really motivated. So when I am enjoying it, I am, I guess, motivated, and that's where I push myself quite hard. I also have, I think it's really important for me is the environment that I'm in. And I don't even know if I would have carried on gymnastics if I didn't have one of my teammates, who's Cameron Lynn. If I didn't have him in the gym with me, then I don't think I would carry on, because the way he was motivated and the way he was pushing himself in training kept me going when I wasn't feeling that kind of way. And then also during lockdown and kind of over time, I started to get a bit more motivated, a bit more kind of into it, and also disciplined. And that meant that when he wasn't feeling it on days, then I would start pushing him. And that was, for me, that was really important, having that environment. But yeah, kind of keep it on the edge. I guess I do, like talking about nutrition and stuff like that, I do try and keep to some sort of healthy diet, but it isn't obviously super strict. I think having something really, really strict like that and no freedom, again, like I was saying earlier, it can become quite stale and things can become really rigid and difficult, and there's no freedom to kind of grow in certain areas. So even on diet, having times where I might have a bit more sugar than normal, or I might not hit certain goals where I don't have enough protein or something like that, it's okay. I don't really hold myself really accountable to it all the time, every single day, every single hour, because if I did, then I think it wouldn't leave me to kind of, I guess, develop. It would become really strict. So on the diet side, I do try and keep it kind of healthy and like hit certain carbs and proteins and stuff like that, and stay away from a lot of processed sugar. But on other sides, I have a lot of support, obviously from coaches, from my teammates, how I was talking, but also from what's called the Scottish Institute of Support. So I'm lucky enough that I basically got good enough that I would get support from Scotland, really. So I get free physio and psychology and S&C and stuff like that. So they'll keep me on top of things like S&C, so they make sure I'm doing the right things at the right time. And we're working out, right now actually, we're working out how I would incorporate our S&C into our training schedule so it doesn't affect our lead up to competitions.
What does S&C
So, sorry, strength and conditioning.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so just, conditioning, really. So the S&C that I do with the Institute of Sport is normally kind of weights based. So the condition, we already do conditioning in the gym every single day. Doesn't matter what we do, we're always doing conditioning. But then we focus more on weight stuff, which will focus on really specific muscles that we need for certain things. So I've got that support there, which is quite lucky, because doing that myself, I think I'd quite struggle with it. So they are professionals and they know what they're doing. And then that also comes hand in hand with physio, psychology and all this, and it keeps me, I guess, fresh and ready all the time. And when I'm struggling, I have that support to back me and kind of keep me on top. So I guess that kind of explains a lot kind of how I keep myself on top and on the edge. But
yeah, no, fair enough. And do you have any pressure from the coaches or some sort of nutrition people of what to eat, or is this completely and always been on your side?
So we do sometimes. A while back when I was younger, my coach, we did like food diaries, but he wasn't super strict about it. We were just checking, trying to get. So this is when we were younger, to learn about like obviously having enough of certain things and not having too much of other stuff. And it was quite lighthearted. It wasn't really strict. There has been quite, I would say, not a great culture in gymnastics when it comes to food. There is quite an insane amount of eating disorders, especially in the women's side. I think obviously gymnastics and the coaches a while back anyway definitely contributed to that, but there is a lot of change that's been happening, which is really good. You still see some of it a bit, but it's nowhere near the same. And if a coach does pressure in the same way that they used to a while back, they will be pulled up for it and it will be taken accountable. So there isn't that same kind of hands-on being like, you need to eat this and you need to eat that as there was before. But from the nutritionist side, I have this woman, Susie, who looks at my nutrition, will do like a food diary, and she'll look at it and she'll be like, okay, you want to probably, because we're such high athletes, we are looking at some specific stuff for their diet, and they'll be like, you want to probably try and spread your protein out over the day a bit more or something, or include more protein in your breakfast, and then maybe some more carbs in this other bit, and try and bring snacks for you to train, some other carbs like other bananas or bars and things like that. And it's quite specific to our training, which is good. But again, I obviously don't need to stick to this really strict specific amount of calories and specific amount of grams of certain things. It is just kind of have that meal that's got a decent amount of protein in it, and have that meal before training that's got a decent amount of carbs in it.
Okay, so we'll get off the nutrition topic, but just one last question here, and this is just in more the competitive terms. What is the division at the competition? Is it based on age? Is it based on weight? Is it based on years in experience?
So it is based on age. So all of it's just always just based on age.
And there is no restriction on weight?
No.
I think that actually answers my first thought about it, because
right,
like coming from a martial arts more area, weight is such a big, especially on a higher level, is such a big part. Like a friend of mine, Antek, who was on the podcast before every fight, like he has to have such a strict diet to hit those marks that they've put him down for, which in your situation doesn't really matter. As long as you're fit and healthy, you can compete in your group.
Yeah, no, definitely, because you're not directly, like, I guess, correlating with other athletes. You're not against each other like physically. It is just with yourself. It doesn't matter about your weight, and it's I guess in something like weightlifting that'd be a bit different, but this isn't, because you're lifting yourself and you're not trying to get like heavier things. It's not like a heavier weight would be an advantage, or necessarily. So a lot of time, lighter weights are better in gymnastics, and that's where, like I was saying, a lot of eating disorders come in. But it can vary a lot. Like you get some gymnasts who are really heavy, who are really strong and good on rings, which is a surprise, obviously, because you want to be lighter. But it does vary quite a lot, and yeah, it's not. You don't have to be a certain weight in a certain area or something.
On that note of weight, I promised you that we'll come back to that later, but yeah. I think this is a good segue for it. One thing that I remember from my childhood as a myth, or maybe there was even those like horror stories of Chinese gymnasts who would have their feet like tied to make them smaller, and like to really keep the body of the young girl stay a body of a young girl. What are maybe some myths or some some fun facts or not so fun facts about gymnastics that you would share with people that people don't know about? Or is this for example true that people who are smaller do better?
Yeah, so I would say usually lighter people and smaller people do better. It is easier. You still, so gymnastics wise, I think the tallest gymnast I've ever seen is maybe, that I know of anyway, I think there is probably a little bit taller, but the ones that I know of are, I think maybe 5'10", 5'11". That's like the tallest you get, which is quite funny because the rest are about 5'4", 5'5". So when they're standing next to them, they do look way over 6 foot and look almost like an NBA player. But yeah, usually being smaller does really help in gymnastics, and it is quite a struggle at a certain height. So I would say it is a myth that you can't be good when you're tall, but it isn't a myth that it is definitely an advantage being smaller. Being smaller, being lighter, like there are some crazy stories you hear obviously over in China and stuff like that. I obviously can't confirm any of that because I don't know it personally,
no, of course.
but they can be ridiculously strict in China and things like Russia. And like I've heard stories of previous coaches heard stories of one's been in Romania where they are incredibly strict and they do crazy kind of conditioning where this is a while back though, this was kind of I think during Soviet times and things like that, so it was a bit different, but they would have them say like run at high altitude for conditioning, and then if they didn't make the lap in a certain time then they had to go again and they had to keep doing it until they made this like lap. I don't know how long it was, maybe like 2 miles or 3 miles or something. And then the coach who was talking about it said he remembers running past one of these guys and he was on like lying on the floor coughing up blood kind of thing. So gymnastics does have a bit of a culture where it is really tough. I would say it's nowhere near as bad obviously in the UK, but it still had a while back. It wasn't great. It is getting better now, but you do still hear some stories like over in China where they have boarding schools and things and kids who are there non-stop, and that is kind of a bit crazy. But I suppose you get that with like pretty much every sport, so it's not unique to gymnastics.
Well, yeah, and I mean, crazy. You said earlier that you train from 1 till 9. So that's already a lot, and then add to that, and that just makes it. When you said about Romanian that story, it just reminds me of the way special forces train, and that's one could argue whether or not that's suitable. It's not you're not training a killing machine that is able to sustain damage.
Yeah.
You're training people to do tricks that are like humanely on the edge. Feats. So yeah, but the moral behind it and the ethics is probably a big topic. Yeah. All right, so now onto the mental game, and this is also particularly interesting, I think, for me and my listeners, because in many ways this can be applied to other stuff. You mentioned before that you have a support from some psychiatrist or someone, psychologists, and what do you do to keep yourself mentally fit? Do you have any routine before the competition? For context, some people like to sort of zone out with their headphones. Do you do any particular activities during the daytime? And how do you then apply that for overcoming some fear or some failures in a way?
So for when you're talking about competitions, I don't really have a specific technique that I do every time. I've found once my physical side of my routines and training get really good, I try to rely on my muscle memory. So before a competition, I basically just have this reaffirming telling myself that I am basically really good at this, I can do this, and this is something I've done every day. And me visualizing, a big part for me is visualizing. Visualization is huge for me, and it's huge for I think a lot of gymnasts. They do that all the time, so I will visualize my routines like multiple times a day before a competition. I will do it like in training and stuff like that before training, because having that feeling and constantly, it's basically when you're visualizing, you're going through the feelings of that routine, and your body does, it's kind of hard to explain, but your body does kind of feel it in a way without even doing it. So you're not exercising your muscles and they're not getting tired, but you still are going through the motions in your head, which in gymnastics anyway, if you do take time off, say if even just like 2 days, you can be losing your balance on like skills really easily, which is kind of crazy. Like obviously you can come back and do stuff. It's not impossible, but you don't. If you could train every day, like, and you like your muscles were able to recover and do that, then it probably would be better for gymnastics to train every single day, because having that time off, you can lose that kind of technique and balance a lot of the time. So coming up to competition, I do visualize a lot. And it means that when I'm not training and I'm trying to keep myself really strong and fit and not work myself to death, that means I can do a lot of stuff in my head, and it will keep me kind of, I guess, going and keep me in the loop with it all. So when I do the competition, I will be physically strong, but also still have gone through everything without missing stuff, I guess.
Can you walk us through? This is very interesting, and like, yeah, visualization, I think at this point is quite normalized as well, and maybe many of our listeners already know that. But just walk me through how do you do it? You know, what's the, imagine today you want to visualize your routine. What is the process?
So usually I will kind of be in a space where I'm quite relaxed. That's quite important, where you don't have a lot of distractions. There can be noise, but obviously if there's a lot of noise, it is quite difficult. So it is a bit like a meditation. So I will a lot of times slow my breathing down and take some time to relax and kind of just not think of anything. And then sometimes you might do it in the bath, sometimes I'll like hold my breath and go into the water. It's kind of immersion that makes it really easy to just concentrate on the routines. And yeah, so I take that time, breathe and relax and get my heart rate down. And then I basically try to go through what I do in training in first person. So I don't see myself doing it. It's like I go through it. And I try to also think about how it feels when I'm doing it. It's like the feeling of the bars in my hands, and like the feeling of when I spin around the bar, or when I do something that I'm like the twisting and stuff. I think it's really important to try to recreate as much as I can when I'm doing it in my head, so then I actually feel it, and then my body also feels it as well, kind of, I guess. So yeah, no, that's my technique.
That's amazing. So what you do there is you anchor those feelings with certain sort of sensations, imagining even them. But yeah, this is really interesting how our brains can be tricked to feel the things that the body is not going through. Like that's very interesting. So for you guys out there who would like to try this, now you have the recipe, and if not, then just Google it. I think there is so many now on visualization that. And now about that, you've obviously had some sort of injuries. Any sport does.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? Because this is one thing that I've noticed about myself. For example, I injured my ankle being thrown, and I do have at the back of my head when we do throws these days still this sort of lingering challenge of like, throwing reminds me of pain, therefore throwing is bad. How do you overcome that to keep going, because you will at some point in your sports career have to face some sort of challenge like that?
So I think it's very natural, obviously. So I will go through stuff, and if I have a bad injury, I still have that kind of paranoia in my head where something might go wrong or something might happen. So like I was telling you earlier today about a fault with the bars, and the wire snapped. Well, the bolt snapped underneath the ground, the wire fell, and then I landed my head on the wooden floor beside the mats and gave myself a concussion. And that was totally not my fault. So then I had that kind of, I guess when I came back, there was that bit of fear where the bar might just do that again. I think for me, I do one, like, accept it. So when I feel these emotions and feel this kind of fear, I do think, okay, it's okay that I'm feeling that, it's natural. But then I also try to think as logically as possible. So in that scenario, for the bar snapping, I think to myself, that's not going to happen again. That's like impossible. That's like 1 in a million chance that happened, and then so it's not going to happen again. The chance of that is ridiculously low, and if that happens again, then it's like I'm some sort of miracle kind of thing. So I try to think a lot logically when I have this kind of fear of injury, but then also I will accept the fear and be like, well, I do want to do this, and I do want to get stuff done, so I'm going to, I guess, it's easier said than done just trying to do it, basically. So there is obviously techniques like talking about like visualization, things outside of it, but I do try to kind of just accept the fear, think of it, okay, that's all right, but I'm just going to push myself right now and go for this, because I know it's scary, but that's okay, and I'm going to try and push past that. It's just an emotion. It's not easy to do. I think when I was younger, I definitely couldn't do that. Now I've gotten a bit older and I think my brain's developed a little more. It's easier to kind of not act on emotion all the time, which is obviously a good thing to act on emotion sometimes, but I think in these kind of scenarios, it's not great. And that's where you got to think a bit more logically, I guess. But obviously, when you're doing something that's split second, like you're talking about when you're doing throws and things, it's not easy to think logically in that scenario. But I would say for me, that's kind of how I go about it generally.
Yeah, no, but from what you're saying, it sounds like you will not get rid of the fear. Instead of it, just push past it, like because you want something more. So the fear over time, because you've done it again and again and nothing happened, will diminish.
Yeah.
Or in the least will become insignificant because you just, as you said, you prove to yourself it's 1 in a million chance.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's, it might be very different if it's something that does happen every day.
Oh yeah.
I think at that point you should get
Probably
a new
should,
bar.
Yeah.
But no, that's a fair point.
No, yeah, it's obviously also, like I was saying, broke my hand last week on a skill, and I have done that type of thing quite a few times where I stubbed my fingers. Obviously that time was a lot worse, where when I stubbed my fingers, my hand broke. And so when I go back, I do want to try that skill, and I know I'm going to have a lot of fear with this. This is probably going to be worse than the bar thing because it's something that's a lot more likely to happen. I think for me though, focusing on, for this skill, trying to catch it, I'm going to really focus on trying to keep, say like something simple, like keeping my hand open. Like, and I know this thing won't happen again. There might be something else that could happen, but I'm obviously not thinking about that. So when I go back, I'm going to try to push past this fear and go for it again. Once I know my hand is fully healed, because I don't want to do something, say if I do the same thing again and make it worse. So once my hand's fully healed, I'm going to go for this skill again, even though it is terrifying, and focus on the small things that will make sure, I guess, it doesn't happen. By thinking about the good technique and being like, I'm going to do that good technique, and not focus on it's like not doing the bad thing, I guess. And be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to hurt myself in this way. I don't want to do that again. I think about, I'm going to do this thing well. I'm going to keep my hand open and not land on straight fingers, kind of thing. Like concentrating on the good technique and knowing I can do it is really important as well. Obviously, trying to push past that fear.
That's really interesting. I heard about this paradox or this phenomenon that when drivers are being taught, for example, like Formula 1 drivers and so forth, are being taught how to act in when they lose control of the car, that one should look towards where they want the car to go, not where the car might go wrong. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the wall, you will go to that wall, into the wall. So, and I think this applies anywhere in life, really, mentally. Which is why it's so dangerous, for example, to constantly think about accidents.
Yeah.
Or like I've heard also that doctors that study so much diseases are more likely to get them just as placebo. If you read every day about flu, one day you will get the flu more likely than someone who just heard about it once. So this is really interesting. It's a sort of a gray zone, I think, in terms of studies, because it demands a lot of study being done on aspects that are quite subjective. And you can't really tell if someone is truly thinking about the accident or not. They can only tell it sort of looking back.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. So now on to the maybe, you've mentioned earlier that it is unlikely for people to go into gymnastics in a later stage of life rather than being like a youngling, let's say a 7-year-old or 10-year-old, or maybe, as you said, even 4-year-old. And obviously you're speaking from the perspective of someone who did do that.
Yeah.
But maybe what advice, or if someone is considering outdoor or for their children considering this or similar sport, what would you say to them to consider? What do you think is important to note? Maybe what is the price to pay for it? Obviously time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So obviously, like I was saying, gymnastics does take a lot of time because it's not only sports. You can't really keep pushing and doing like an hour session where you get a lot done because you need to take time between shots. So it does take a bit of time. It obviously can cost money, maybe a little more than some other sports, but it does. I might just kind of go blank right now. Sorry.
What
Sorry,
let's go this way.
Yeah.
Imagine I have a child and I'm considering whether or not it would be beneficial for them to start going for gymnastics or like those little tumblers classes to start with. What should I take into consideration if I have the money and I potentially have the time to drive them back and forth?
So I think getting them there every day is quite important. So, not obviously every single day of the week. I mean, every time that they have a class, you try and get them there pretty much every time. And it's obviously within reason. If they're sick or if something, they're upset with stuff and they don't want to go kind of thing, then obviously you don't force them to do it. But I would say going through the motions, even if it isn't great, but going like a lot, they'll start to learn what they like, start to learn what they don't like, start to enjoy it in a certain way, and they can also improve quite a lot. It is one of the sports where you have to be there consistently to improve. It's not something you can pick up naturally. Obviously you can be talented, but it is something that you do need to be there a lot. So obviously a lot of time, but also being consistent with it is really important.
Do you know why your parents got you there?
So initially they took me when I was 4, obviously, to the tumble tot stuff because I was jumping all over the couches and the furniture and stuff like that, and they wanted me to go somewhere so I didn't ruin the house. And then once I was enjoying it there, and obviously some things might have found easy and things, and then got recommended and I wanted to do it, they were like, yeah, sure. So they always supported me, but they actually never really, so obviously never forced me, but they never pushed me that hard in training, which when I was younger, I don't know if that was necessarily a good or a bad thing. I think it probably was pretty good that I got that choice. So, but it meant that when I was younger, I did miss like a lot of sessions, which probably stunted my improvement at that time. It wasn't a massive deal. I chose to do it. It wasn't. I'm not blaming anyone for that. But then as I got a bit older, I kind of managed to come in pretty much every day, and when I could drive, I held myself a bit more accountable, and I came in like every day, and that's when I started to really improve, and I kept myself consistent, kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting, because it's a difficult balance to strike, and I bet it's very difficult for parents as well as a balance to strike, because I have friends that were so intensely pushed towards some activities that they've never gotten back to them after the sort of rage age of 16, because that was the moment when they were like, no, this is so traumatic, you made me play for 8 hours a day, this is it, I'm done.
Yeah, of course.
And then on the other hand, if you don't facilitate those days when the kid doesn't want to go, they might lose interest or being thrown out of the team because of not attending, even though it's something beneficial to them. So I think this is very, on a personal basis kind of
it's really
challenge.
difficult. Really difficult. It's not easy at all. And
it worked out for you though.
Yeah,
It
of course.
seems like they managed to get that sweet spot of not getting you completely off, but then not getting you so, overwhelmed that you would quit just out of,
I would say, so it's quite funny, Matt. So my parents are the complete opposite as the guy I was talking about earlier, Cammy. His parents, they would push him quite a lot, which I didn't think was a bad thing at all. So he did basketball, rugby and gymnastics. So they were quite into getting him to go all the time. But then that never affected him in any way, except that he was constantly wanting to be in places, which I thought was quite interesting. I thought that was actually really, well, obviously amazing, because now that he's an adult, he has always been in the gym all the time and never wants to not be there. Which also can be kind of detrimental, because that means when he isn't feeling good, he sometimes will turn up and it's like, you need to rest. But he had that. His parents pushed him quite a bit, which again wasn't a bad thing. And he managed to keep that love for the sport as well, and it didn't affect him that way. But he's trying to find that balance is obviously really hard. And my parents were quite different from him, where they didn't push me that much to go. They supported me obviously and wanted me to do well, but say if I was ever basically not pretend to be sick, but was like I just really didn't want to go and I couldn't be arsed, they'd be like, okay, yeah, you don't have to go. And I don't,
I bet, I mean, yeah, as you say, it might just be also, you gotta know your kid.
Yeah.
With them, they've seen that Cameron was driven to go, or maybe there was so much energy that he had to expel that was just the way to go.
Yeah.
All right, so Euan, as our final, let's say, topic maybe to touch upon, and I don't want to press too much into that. I think it's also very fresh still, and I'm more interested in what is for you into the future, especially that we talked on our at the party that gymnastics or any sports, any professional sports has its use before date.
Yeah.
And you will be quite young getting out of it. So maybe just give us a little bit of context. You say that you're taking care of your father's business now a little bit.
Yeah.
And also, what are the next steps, do you think? And obviously, I'm not pressing you to finish gymnastics right now. Just saying, like, what have you thought about for after?
So for me, I'm wanting to continue training until at least the Commonwealth Games. I'm gonna kind of see how it feels at that point, depending if I want to carry on or if I want to finish there. So it's either gonna be 2026 or 2027, because the planning hasn't really gone ahead the way they wanted because of funding and things. We're not really sure where the Commonwealth Games is going to happen, so they might delay it a year to give the hosting country a bit more time to plan it and organise things. So kind of loose plan is to finish at that point for me. So that'd be me at 24, I think, at the time, or 23. And so it's quite young. Gymnasts normally do retire, even like the best do retire, and they're like mid to late 20s. It's rare for them to get up to like 30. So after that, for me, I'm kind of wanting to travel a wee bit, do a bit of stuff, explore, do a few things. And then once I kind of do that, I have, again, these are all really loose plans. I don't really have anything specific that I really want, because my focus has always been gymnastics. But I do think about becoming a stunt double. It's a career that I've wanted to do. It's been quite interesting to me. But the only thing is, it takes up a lot of time and takes up quite a bit of money and stuff like that. So I can't do it I can't like get into the stunt, what's called the British Stunt Registry. I can't get onto that without having a huge amount of time. So I can't be doing gymnastics at the same time, kind of thing. So as of right now, I'm obviously training, but I'm also working, like you're saying, at my dad's business. So taking over after he passed, it was a little bit difficult because we didn't really understand a lot. And a lot of things that he did was all in his own head. So a lot of procedures and a lot of things that we had to do wasn't really written down. It didn't have a process. So we're all trying to figure out now. But we're getting by. it's been okay, and it's actually been a good experience, I think, and it's something I can also write down on a CV, say that I've ran a business centre, which is quite cool because we were thrown at the deep end, but we did, I guess, start to float. We started understanding things and working stuff out, and it has been kind of fulfilling. It feels good when I've been, I guess, needing for me to be there. So like in a company where I'm employed, like I worked at a bar before, a lot of the time I didn't have that sense of fulfillment when I was working because I just felt like another, almost, I guess, another number. So having a job where I'm needed and there's not another person that can really do exactly what I'm doing without taking time to learn everything, I guess it feels kind of, like I say, fulfilling. Feels good. Makes me motivated to keep going, kind of thing. So I do want to find some sort of job later in life as well where I am needed, I guess. Kind of they rely on me, and it does fill me with kind of, I guess, don't know how to describe it, it just makes me feel good.
Feeling of reward. Yeah. I think a big part of it is also that you know that you're doing it for people you love, and it's a part of sort of a responsibility bigger than just a paycheck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is a big, I think is a big part of feeling satisfied with jobs. Just before we finish though, that's very interesting, and I hope that into the future I'll have a little interview with you as a stunt double by then. But what does it take to become a stunt double? You've mentioned that briefly when we were at the party, but just for our for those people out there who would like to become one, here is a recipe.
Well, I don't know if I know enough yet, but I've been wanting to get onto the British Stunt Registry. So the British Stunt Registry is basically, you need to become qualified in a certain amount of areas, and then once you become qualified, you get on this register where a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows and stuff like that, and big, I think you can get up to like Hollywood stuff, they can look you up, and you can look you up on the registry and basically invite you to come along and then work on set. Initially, when I was doing it, I didn't think there was going to be good money in it, so I was like, I don't even know if I can do it as a career. But then I was asking someone about it who was going for it, and she was saying they get paid actually quite a ridiculous amount. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's not going to stop me anymore. But so to get on the register, you have to qualify in. It's been a while since I've been looking up, so I'm not entirely sure about everything. But I think there's 5 different kind of groups you have to become, I guess, well versed in. One of them is fighting, which I think is probably going to be the hardest one for me. So you need to learn a fighting style, and you need to get close to. Well, it depends on obviously the different fighting styles, but I think on some of them you have to get close to like a black belt, so it would take a few years, kind of thing. Or other ones you have to be. Have a certain win percentage in competitions that you can't have lost too many competitions, which I thought was a bit ridiculous. But then in the other groups, there's stuff like, for me, gymnastics, obviously really easy because I do that, so it's quite a low level compared to what I already do. And then trampolining, which is, I guess, an offset from gymnastics, so again, that's pretty easy. And then there's other ones like climbing, which obviously got the upper body strength. And then there are a few things which I want to do which aren't, I guess, supported by gymnastics. I won't have that advantage, but most of them do. So I think a lot of stunt doubles do start as gymnasts because you've already got so many skills, but then there are some that I really need to, I guess, get down to if I really want to do it. Like, it's going to take a while, it's going to take a lot of work. But yeah. If you are wanting to get into it, I would say you need to search for the British Stunt Registry. You obviously don't have to. You can apply to go into sets and do stuff, especially on smaller movies and TV shows or whatever, or any kind of media. And you do have to have some sort of experience to get on the register. So you might want to try that, and then you I guess become well known through there, and then you don't need to become on the register. But that is the main thing you want to look for, I guess, if you're wanting to get into it.
It sounds like a sort of a gold standard space. Yeah. That to be recognized, the best way would be to be on that registry plus experience rather than doing it in a gray zone. Yeah. And about martial arts, many martial arts you can train while you travel. Yeah. So maybe that's a way forward. Go around the world while every time having a month of Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu or anything else in different countries. That's it's always there. I think over the past few years it has become so popular as well among people just as a recreational sport that it's much more normalized, I think, in our times. Awesome. Well, Euan, that's really interesting. I don't want to be over tiring you. So on our podcast, our, let's say, final tradition with the guests is that whatever you'd like to share with the audience that you've not shared before. So sometimes it can be a quote that you live by, some advice or some thought, some encouragement, whatever it is. The floor is yours, what you would like to leave with our listeners for now, and obviously later in life, once we meet again, we might have some different thoughts to share with them.
Not entirely sure. I would say, I guess, I guess a two-part to it. For me, for kind of my life, I've been trying to go by the value where I don't want to do something if I don't enjoy it or have this certain goal in mind at the end. So for me, right now it's gymnastics, but it's I want to enjoy my life and not think about everything. Need to be really serious and I guess have this perfect life people talk about, being like you have to get like a 9 to 5 kind of thing, but also making sure not to steer clear from having something that is fulfilling. So I guess find that balance for me where I enjoy, like, kind of relax and have that life where I want to do things that I naturally want, but also keep myself balanced where I push myself to do things maybe is not as enjoyable, but I know will make me feel fulfilled by the end of it. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how I'm trying to live my life at the moment, is do things that will give me fulfillment, but also enjoy life, I guess, and not force myself to do stuff that I think I need to do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Euan, for coming on the show.
No worries, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
That was really awesome, and for all you guys out there, as per usual, I hope that was interesting, and other than that, have a wonderful week, stay happy, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.